A very good afternoon and a very warm welcome to see so many of you joining us during your lunch hour. We really do appreciate it. To those of you from my LSBU family, welcome. And I've seen comments in the chat that we have people from universities across the country. So a very warm welcome to you this afternoon. My name is Sanchia Alasia. I'm the Acting Director of Equality, Diversity and Inclusion, based in People and Organisational Development, otherwise known as HR, at the London South Bank University. And I'm really delighted that Professor Megan Lawton is joining us. She is Professor of Learning and Teaching in Academic Practice in the College of Learning and Teaching at the University of Wolverhampton. And I love the West Midlands. My mum lives in Wolverhampton, so I've got a special love for people that live there too. She's also a National Teaching Fellow and a Principal Fellow of the Higher Education Academy. Professor Lawton does have dyslexia and so has always struggled with traditional education. She's co-chair of her university's Disability Staff Network, and we have one here too. And she's also a member of the National Association of Disabled Staff Networks, and I'm a member, and I know that Nikki Martin, who's on the call, is also a member as well. As I said, she does have dyslexia, and so is really passionate about challenging the traditional approaches to learning and teaching to be more inclusive. So before I hand over, just wanted to give a little praise of the session. So, you know, Professor Lawton has really risen to the ranks throughout her career, and she's been able to do this by recognizing her strengths, what her strengths are, but also making sure that her weaknesses are supported. And particularly during the pandemic, which has been challenging for all of us, she has been working particularly hard to support staff who have disabilities to make sure that their issues are taken up. And she has set up 2 staff forums, one relating to autism and one for dyslexia. And so I'm really delighted now to hand over to Professor Megan Lawton, who will give us a talk for about roughly 20 minutes. And then we will have an interactive bit where we're able to ask questions. So Professor Lawton, over to you.
Thank you very much. Neil, could you just put up the first couple of slides? I have a glamorous assistant working for me who is going to be doing the slides for me. So making a difference for dyslexic students and staff, and I want to use those 2 different perspectives and intertwine them really. I've been both a student, not that successfully, but okay, and also I'm a member of staff. My email's there, so if anybody does want to contact me afterwards, you're very welcome to do so. Neil, could you put the next slide up, please? So this is me. Not bad for somebody who was always classed as non-academic, which was a title that sort of dogged me for the whole of my academic career until I eventually got my doctorate. And it is something that I particularly am keen about. Now you can leave the next one up. Do you want to put the next slide up? I wanted to start off by just really sort of setting the scene for where I want to come from this. And particularly for me, I want to use the affirmation model of disability, which is really looking at the abilities and strengths, and also a non-tragic view of disability. I'm not a victim of. I am dyslexic. That's part of who I am. That doesn't describe and judge me. It is just the way I am and the way that I act. Looking at other models like the medical, the social model, and for many, many years, I was head of a centre that looked at deaf studies, and we set the first degree up in sign language interpreting. And the cultural model, I'm deaf with a capital D. I'm hearing more people talking about I'm disabled with a capital D to try and actually gain ownership of that. So, but I'm going to be talking here from the affirmation model. I'm going to be looking at the strengths and the abilities and this non-tragic view of disability. Can we have the next slide up, please? Before I talk specifically about dyslexia, I want to just look at this kind of occurring where neurodiversity is concerned, because a lot of the traits that I might have don't neatly package into one definition or not. So could you just progress the slide? So this is just a rough idea of some of that intersectionality that you get under sort of the bigger term of neurodiversity, and it's not easy. You know, bits and pieces. I don't have that many issues with dyscalculia, but in terms of dyspraxia, you know, I'm clumsy. There are things I do that don't just neatly package me into one area. Could you progress the slide again for me? And what I want to do is also look at some of the kind of contested theories and views around dyslexia and neurodiversity. We know that there are more males than females statistically. However, that is probably to do with people are contesting the fact that for many females, we just get on and do it. We don't actually get diagnosed as much as where male diagnosis is concerned. That's very true within the autistic spectrum. There is contested again a genetic link that dyslexia tends to run in families, I mean, my kids are both dyslexic. Probably my father was, if we look back at some of his writing and things like that. The notion of curability, you know, I can't be cured of my dyslexia. I can work around it. And in fact, one of the things that is contested and has been in the past, that these conditions even exist. And there has been, oh no, dyslexia is just being careless, and it doesn't really exist as a condition. You know, so I'm not going to go into those contested areas, but I do recognise that there are views around this area. Neil, could you progress the slide? So what I want to talk about here is just really this bigger picture of neurodiversity and looking at an inclusive curriculum design and some of the things that we need to consider in our academic practice. So teaching all to all senses, that kind of multisensory approach, and all learning preferences, providing multiple means to engage and for assessment choice. I do a lot of work with our staff about engagement and particular assessment choices. An example of a piece of assessment I do, I'm asking somebody to write a reflective account on a portfolio of evidence. It doesn't have to be written. It could be a reflective account that is videoed. It could be a reflective account that has a concept map and has a narrative over the top of it. I'm actually marking and looking at the reflection, not the means by which that reflection is actually offered to me. It is about respecting individuals, and inclusivity by design is also about enabling individuals to be active participants. I think differentiation is really interesting, and it links to that notion of encouraging metacognition. And what I mean by that is that the different people will have different levels and needs of interpretation and information. I'm a big picture thinker. If I need to have an overview of what I'm being asked to look at, I can then work back to the detail. If I start at the detail without that big picture, I'm completely lost. However, if you know, working with other colleagues where they might have hyper-focusing and they actually need the detail and they need to know where something has come from, they need additional reading around it, then all of those things can be considered. And I've written and produced quite a lot of work about flipped learning. And flipped learning, if I'd only had that in my own education, would have made such a difference for me. The ability to engage with materials before I then listen to somebody talking about it would make so much difference to me. About providing opportunities to address knowledge and skill gaps without remediation. You know, I don't want to be seen that I need that horrible kind of word to have a remedial support. Yeah, I do need some additional support, but it's not because I've done something wrong or I'm lacking in some way. It's also about fostering respect and allowing people that sense of belongingness. And I think for me, one of the key things that I'm really working on in my own university is this notion about nothing about us without us. You know, if you're talking about people with a disability, they need to be included in those conversations. Too long have people done things to us without including us. And I think this is a notion that is absolutely key to what I believe in. Neil, could you progress? So I'm not going to read through all of the quotes here, but I think this is something. Ron Davis wrote a book called The Gift of Dyslexia. And I think what he really did with this was to actually turn the conversation around, rather than actually saying what people can't do, but actually looking at those abilities. If you can progress the slide for me. So, we've got some here, Churchill, Einstein, Walt Disney, and the little bit in the picture, people have gone back and looked at Leonardo da Vinci's work and surmised by his creativity, his intuitiveness, and also he's got mirror writing, which you can just see there, that there's potentially traits and characteristics of dyslexia that are shown with his work. If you could just touch the slide again. So all of these people have, I would have said, sort of characteristics, and Churchill, Einstein, Walt Disney were defined as being on dyslexic. That creativity, that holistic view of things, that intuitive and that spatial awareness. And these, if you see these as gifts rather than looking at the negatives, then you're actually starting to see that there's a real need and ability for people in a team to have some of these traits. The link at the bottom is to the British Dyslexia Association, and it's the main organisation within the UK where you can get advice and support. Neil, could you just progress? So in this kind of gift of dyslexia, if you could just touch it'll start to reveal. So this different approaches to the way that you actually perceive things, of being very highly aware of environments and patterns and the like. I am ridiculously curious. I like to know what is something behind it. I will be always asking questions. I do mainly think in pictures rather than words. So therefore, if I'm learning something, if I've got a picture as a hook to hold things on, then the words will follow. I am highly intuitive and I will unpick things, and I'm quite insightful. I don't necessarily know why I think things, but I'll work backwards to find the evidence. And this can be really off-putting for some people. I do use all my senses, apart from I don't particularly, the worst thing you can ever give to me is as a book without pictures and just plain black text on a white piece of paper. That does absolutely nothing for me. I think very much, and I work through patterns, and I like to verbalize what I'm thinking, because that really holds for me in my mind what I'm thinking. I do have a very vivid imagination, and that sometimes can be a downfall, which I'll explain a little bit. But all of these traits are discussed further, and you can look online. The link here is from this Ron Davis book, The Gift of Dyslexia. And I think if we could start thinking about it as a gift, and in fact, there was a really good TED talk about this as well that you can act. One of the things that Ron Davis talked about was the fact that in Silicon Valley back in the 90s, they had a lot of people who were very logical, who worked things through in progress, and looked at a huge amount of detail, but then there weren't the bigger picture thinkers that were creative. So taking dyslexia as a syndrome, first of all, no one person is ever going to have the same traits and characteristics, but this is me. So what do? Well, I mix up P, B, and D constantly, and N and H. I've just done it there. If I want to go how and now, I don't know the difference. I actually have to find a word like how, have. Okay, now I can write it. I don't know why, how, and now, but I freeze sometimes, and I mix up. I have an interesting one, conceptual reversal, and I will hear things and I will twist it 180 degrees. The dinner's in the oven. No, the dinner's in the fridge. I think I said oven, but actually what I've said is fridge. But I don't know the difference. That can be hilarious in some ways. When somebody tables a paper at a committee meeting, I start to read it and I've read it completely the opposite of what is actually written there. If somebody then asks me to read it quickly and comment, you will get some very bizarre comments from me. If you are ever in a car with me, don't listen to me, look at what my hands are doing, because I will say left when I mean right, but I'll always point in the right direction. I am clumsy. As a kid, I was always falling over, and that is sometimes part of that that link, that crossover, their intersectionality within neurodiversity. Adding and not ending words. I will add S's to a lot of words and EDs or not, dependent. I will see them later, but I won't see them when I'm doing it. You're very lucky at the moment. I don't think I've done it too often, but I don't finish and I mix up sentences. So I will say a sentence and in my mind I finished it, but I'll actually start another sentence halfway through the sentence that I haven't completed. And so I can kind of look a bit confused, but it's because my brain is firing on all cylinders and I'm actually almost like one step ahead of actually what I'm thinking and saying. When I write very long sentences and I write very descriptive sentences. And what I've had to learn to do is to, if I write something first, I have to go back and break it up probably 3 to 4 different sentences. And I do have a visual stress reaction, which I'm going to talk a little bit about later on. But here's my big plus. But my big pluses are, I was told I have superior spatial awareness. I have a piece of paper that says that. I've been told I'm a good verbal communicator. I'll leave you to decide whether that's true or not. I am intuitive, which can get me into difficulties sometimes, but I kind of therefore a big picture thinker. I'm a great problem solver. And I don't get wedded to one view or opinion. I can, well, it could be this, or maybe that, or how about this? And that creative side of me is something that I've learned to value. And I'll talk about that learning to value, which I think is really, really important. So in my role as an academic, let's have a look at the positives. What am I good at? So in terms of this great problem solving, I've been put in a part of the university where I will look at new courses, I will come up with new ideas, I will be asked to think about a particular issue and offer solutions or offer different ways of thinking about things. Do you want to progress slide? We've just talked about those. I think one thing that's really important for me is also to be a role model, and it's almost like kind of coming out when I was actually starting to own my dyslexia. I haven't always had positive experiences. I think my doctorate made a huge difference to how I perceived myself, and I actually thought, damn, I've got to a doctorate, therefore perhaps I shouldn't be so shy about my writing, and perhaps I should have a voice. And I started to kind of hit back if people put me down, and if people sort of, I have been in committees where people have marked my English on a paper because they knew I was dyslexic. It wouldn't have been done to anybody else. But then I've challenged them saying, can you understand it? You know, is it clear? Most people have said, yes, it is. I said, well, get over the English then. I am activities focused. I know I don't learn from reading and writing and listening that well. But what are the issues for me? So I am absolutely scared of publishing. So yeah, I'm a professor, but feedback can be really, really brutal. And also there's very little or no consideration about timescales and editing. You're very much on your own. Things like, oh, this is a bit careless, or this needs careful proofreading, or there are some silly mistakes. Those are really, really awful words and phrases and ways of treating me. Marking takes me longer. It takes me longer to read. I can misread something. I have to often reread something due to short-term memory. That's why I've changed a lot of my assessments. You know, it takes a lot of convincing to me why something has to be a 3,000-word essay, when in fact there could be so many different interesting ways of measuring whether somebody's met a learning outcome or not. I also find written feedback particularly takes me longer because of spelling or grammar mistakes. I use assessment rubrics an awful lot, because assessment rubrics, I can pre-prepare them, I can work with colleagues, and then I can give individual feedback, but I've got the assessment rubrics that takes out a lot of the stress for me in terms of that spelling and grammar mistakes. So I would highly recommend considering the assessment rubrics. They're good for me, but they're also good for students. If you've got a dyslexic student or any student on the, to actually know what you're being marked on and to know what you're going to get marks for is really important. And this conceptual reversal is something that can cause me problems. As I say, that being online for this last almost 2 years has been great. I haven't been in one committee when somebody has actually tabled a paper. One of my issues, and I'm trying desperately to work on it, but not always succeeding, is interrupting. And that's not because I'm being rude, it's just that I've thought of something, and I know with my short-term memory, if I kind of don't say it, I will forget it. And I also, sometimes I forget I've just spoken out loud. I actually sort of catch myself, go, oh, did I just say that, or did I think it? And I've had to apologise because I interrupt, and it's because that is in the here and now. My mind has triggered me doing something, and I'm apologising for that. So, hints and tips. Really, this is related to both staff and students. Really, always ask the individual about their preferences. Just don't make assumptions about everybody having a particular view and opinion. Do you want to just click through these? One of the things we've also had a lot of people sort of talking about is there used to be tutor awareness sheets, there used to be tutor advice about printing on blue paper, printing on cream paper. A lot of people who have visual stress, and I'll talk about that in a moment, we have our own glasses, we have our own transparencies. If you print something on a blue paper or cream paper, that changes the hue, the tone, or the colour, because the transparency we have is supposed to be put over a white piece of paper. If I'm on screen, I can put a transparency over my screen, and I can't really do that if the screen is already coloured. It's really important to provide materials before any meeting and a session. First of all, you can look at the spelling of something. I look at patterns when I see words. So if I get a kind of a pattern of a word, then it's easier for me to understand it, spell it, and say it. I also do need to have the concepts right, because if I can read around it, or even if I can watch a video, that works better for me. Then when I'm actually going into a session, I'm aware of the concept, and I'm sure about what we're talking about. Don't hand out materials and ask for them to be read and then for comments. That's not very good. Giving clear and unambiguous instructions, and don't give long lists. If you tell me to go and pick up a pencil, a ruler, a rubber, I'll remember 2 of the 3. When I was a kid, oh my goodness, I would have loved to have had a mobile phone. And it breaks my heart when I see big posters saying switch off your mobile phones. I don't use my phone very often to make phone calls, but what I do use is the camera an awful lot. I take images of PowerPoint slides. When I was a kid or when I was a student, to copy things off the blackboard would take me ages to do, because I would have to look up. My short-term memory would mean I couldn't remember what a whole sentence was. I couldn't remember the spelling. Every time somebody put something on a PowerPoint, I would have written half of it down and then lose a lot of it. Having breaks, tiredness and stress causes your dyslexia can be more acute because of that. I think this allowing people to verbalise, discuss, mind map and draw. When I started as a student, I saw everybody else writing things down, therefore I thought I had to do the same thing. Only when I had my education psychologist report, and they said, you've got superior spatial awareness, have you thought about mind mapping and drawing? It was like, oh my God, can I do that? I didn't know I could do it. Everybody else is writing down, can I draw? And I didn't realise I could do that. Offering different alternative ways of demonstrating skills and knowledge. Why does something have to be written? Why do you have to do an essay? I think about giving marks, making it really, really clear. If, for example, and I'm not saying it's not the case, but if a level of written English is a requirement, then you need to be very, very clear about it and the expectations. So, for example, I do a lot of supervision of doctorates. I know with some of my colleagues who are dyslexic that they are going to have it proofread, because to reach the level of English, it can't be done. But also proofreading is something that has to be done. I can't read my own work. I can't see my own mistakes, and nor if you point it out to me, I still can't see it. To me, my writing is in perfect English. It's not, I know it's not, but I can't see my mistakes. So I need somebody to change my language. Now, I mentioned a bit about, I was going to revisit this visual stressing, so scotopic sensitivity or the Island syndrome, sometimes linked to dyslexia, but it's a separate condition. For me, I often, if you look at the bottom right-hand corner, if I'm tired and if I'm reading black text on white, physically, this is what I will see. Words will move and I really struggle. In fact, my eyes start to close down, and I get some kind of almost like I'm going to sleep and I'm not tired, but my eyes just cannot cope with the visual stress that I actually get. Other people will see things like they'll see rivers, so you'll see patterns in words rather than the words themselves. So if you can go on to the next slide. So this tries to sort of map really. So for me, the top left, that sort of pale blue, I can read that absolutely perfectly. The words are not moving, and the yellow at the bottom is okay. It's not my preferred one. But for the white on the black, when I'm looking at it now, the words are actually shimmering. When I have a transparency, or I do have some glasses that have a coloured screen, it makes that shimmering stop. And I can actually read things really, really clearly. Sometimes if my eyes get tired, I will change a colour. And so for me, either the pale blue or the yellow works and just stops that moving. And you may not be aware that that's why students use your transparencies. But this is why why people do use it. I had to go through a 2-hour optician's appointment to get the right colour and the hue that works for me. You know, it makes huge difference, and that's why students and members of staff might be actually using that. So I think we're coming towards the end of what I wanted to present to you now. We're going to open for questions, but also if we can just take to the next slide. What I've tried to do is put some references, that's one forward, put some references to various bits and pieces that I've used in this, but also other sources of information that I thought you might find useful. So this is me. This is who I am, and I think really what I want to say is, you know, there's a real gift to being dyslexic. What you find is if you were put down, if you're told you're non-academic, or that you were a burden, or that you're a problem, or you're othered, then that's their problem. And I think what I want to do is kind of really fight that challenge and go, yeah, you know, it's a real gift. So thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you, Professor Megan Lawton. That was an awesome presentation, and myself and Neil will handle the questions, and I can see we've got questions coming in thick and fast. But I just wanted to just, I guess, share my reflections and maybe take the chair's privilege in asking the first question. So, you know, you sort of talked about those labels, and people like to put people in labels, particularly people that work in universities. You know, you're an academic member of staff, you're a non-academic member of staff, and these labels can sometimes, I guess, be needed for categorization, but sometimes they can be unhelpful. And it's really important that you talked about that intersectionality, because you know, the labels that people place on us, we might fit more than one label. If I take myself as an example, I'm Black, I'm a woman, I have a long-term chronic health pain condition called endometriosis. So I can move around, you know, different spaces, and I want to be kind of heard in all of those spaces and not just placed into one. You sort of, you know, emphasize the affirmation model, and, you know, how you can use you know, the gift of dyslexia to advocate for change, raise awareness and advocate for change. All of those tips and tools that you have shared with us are things that all of us can take away and make the experiences for our staff and students with dyslexia better. You know, and here at the London South Bank University, like most other universities, we do have our access and participation plan. And so as part of that, we are thinking about how to make our curriculum more inclusive? How do we improve student outcomes? How do we facilitate that cultural change? And I like the statement that you said, nothing about us without us. So it's important that as part of our work, whether we're doing policy change for staff or policy change for students, that they are at the heart of those conversations, because they will also know what kind of things that they need. And we need to just think about the support, that we can give to our dyslexic staff and students. What support, and you've given us so many tips and tools there, and there will be things that they will be very good at, just like any one of us, and there will be things where they need just that extra bit of support. Things might need to be done slightly differently, but in the end, it makes the outcome not just better for them, but better for us, because if we're able to support better learning outcomes for our students and a better experience for our staff, then actually we will get that satisfaction that we have made our universities a better place to work and study. So the question I wanted to ask you had a lot of really sort of interesting things to say, and you are sort of a professor, which in kind of academic terms is kind of seen as one of the most senior levels of university life. Have you had, and you mentioned some of the barriers, in terms of you've showed us some of the barriers that you've had to face in your presentation, but in terms specifically of your career progression, have there been any barriers? Have you faced any stereotypes or otherwise in terms of your rise through the academic ranks?
Yeah, very much so. Is people perceiving what is traditional, and I hate the term academic and non-academic. I started as a career as an education technologist. My first degree was graphics, photography and TV production. So I always came, and you find a lot of people get pushed towards careers like that because your abilities are recognised, being that creativity, that visual side of it. I talked about actually the way that publishing is a nightmare, and the process is very, very brutal. So I decided to start to talk about my work in different formats. So blogs, conference presentations, seminars, so that my work was being recognised, but not necessarily through journals. I did a couple of book chapters. I had my arm twisted by a colleague who said, "You can do this." And I kind of squirmed and hated it. He said, "I will support you to do it. If you write from the heart, I will try and put it with you." And so I co-authored to start with. And I worked with a number of people where they knew that the co-author, let me write it, and I just needed editing. I hate single author because I find the feedback brutal. The word careless, there's some silly mistakes. So I've probably spent hours and hours checking my English, and it's not careless. I've never been careless. But that put down can make me feel sort of that big. And many people who are dyslexic might have spent a huge amount of hours on their English knowing that it's going to be picked up on. And then a silly comment like, "Oh, this needs careful proofreading," as though you haven't been careful, or careless, silly mistakes. They're not silly to me. I don't see them. So I think that kind of humanity in the way we talk about it, but also I built up a trust with somebody who knows that there is no point underlining words for me, which is what has happened in all my life. Underline or circle the word. I don't see the mistake I've made, because to me it looks fine. I just need somebody to change it, not to make a comment about it, not to put me down, but to make those changes. So that it's about, I approach my career kind of not consciously, but actually going, what am I good at? And how can I try to avoid, but I do like to speak up, and I do have ideas. And once I was recognised for having ideas, I worked closely with a colleague who was on the autistic spectrum, and she hates that, but she's amazing at detail. So between the two of us, we're a great team. So I will do presentations, I will put forward ideas, she will happily look at the detail. Please never put me to look at validation documents. I get incredibly bored doing them. I don't like the detail, but let me come up with the ideas for new courses and new modules. That's what my skills are.
Thank you. So again, just re-emphasising you know, making and utilizing, you know, and capitalizing on those strengths and recognizing that you may need support in particular areas. So we have questions coming in through the chat, and also we have a hand up. So if I start with